Welcome to the Red Light Exposé podcast.
We are an international grassroots survivor-led circle.
Our goal is to counter the growing acceptance of sex work ideology.
We aim to raise awareness of the harms of commercializing sex,
meaning prostitution, porn, stripping, and BDSM.
Through honest, in-depth conversations,
we elevate voices often ignored and silenced.
Together, we're challenging stereotypes and dismantling myths.
We envision a healthier, safer society, especially for women and girls.
We appreciate your company on this journey.
Hello, thank you for joining us for our very first episode. My name is Andrea Hines, and I am a woman in Canada who spent 7 years in our licensed and regulated brothel system in Edmonton, Alberta. I am super excited for today's guest. With me, I have survivor of sex trafficking in Canada, Casandra Diamond. She is nationally recognized as an anti-trafficking leader, serving as a trusted advisor to all levels of government. In 2014, she founded Bridge North Women's Mentorship and Advocacy Services, a nonprofit dedicated to ending sex trafficking in Canada through direct service, public education, and advocacy. Casandra is the recipient of many awards and honors. Just to name a few is the Voice of Courage Award, which she received in 2019 from Boost Child and Youth Advocacy Center, Leading Women Building Communities Award through the Ministry of the Status of Women in 2018, Attorney General's Victim Services Award of Distinction through the Ministry of Attorney General in 2017, and the Inspiration Award through the Joy Smith Foundation in 2014. So welcome, Casandra. So honored to have you here today.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm so grateful to be here with you.
Thank you. So we'll start with a little disclaimer for our listeners. Casandra and I are currently in Winnipeg, Manitoba in a hotel room with a pretty random setup here to try to record this episode. We came together from opposite sides of the country. Cassandra's in Ontario and I'm in Alberta. And we're here for a law enforcement conference, a 2-day conference hosted by Empower Men, which is a subdivision of a organization called the Mama Wichita Center here in Winnipeg. And so for the last 2 days, they've had a prosecuting demand conference, which has the intention of bringing leaders together to deter sex buying and exploitation. So I will say, if you hear any furnaces kick on, any vehicles driving by, any hotel room doors slamming outside of our room, please have some sympathy and grace for us, because we are just trying to make it happen. I just could not meet Casandra for the first time in person after us knowing each other for so long without stealing some of her time for this interview. So there's a few things that we want to cover. And, I know as a survivor, you are probably always asked to share your story. And I'm familiar with your story, but I know some of our listeners might not be. So I'm just going to pass it over to you to kind of take us on a little journey about how you ended up in the commercial sex industry as a minor, and just kind of an overview of what that was like in that journey for you.
Andrea, I'm so grateful to have this time with you. And your work really, I just wanted to say before I get started, your work really inspires me. And it is something that I can lean into when I'm having hard days, so I don't feel alone. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Anybody and everybody who's listening to this podcast, I really appreciate your time, your energy, and your effort when I know you could be doing so many other things. But instead, let's start with maybe some of how Andrea and I come to have so many things in common, actually. And our starting life, I'm not sure if it's the same, but as a young girl, I had grown up in a family that was struggling with very significant mental health issues, both parents. And this created, unfortunately, a chaotic type of home life for myself and my sibling. And so through this kind of chaotic home life, I would experience a lot of physical violence, witness a lot of violence. I would start experiencing at home just neglect, because of the mental health, in order to kind of keep us safe, what my parent would do is just kind of put us in a room, away from them, so that they could, continue. They knew that they were then, kind of losing some of their abilities to parent. And so they would put us in a room to protect us, but that would have us there for sometimes hours and hours and hours on end. So, and if it wasn't, a room, as we got a little bit older, then it was out the front door. So front door opened, kids went out, front door closed. And so here I am, very young, 4 or 5 years old, on the streets of Scarborough with no support or no protection. I share this with my parents' permission, of course I do. And I also, just at this point, really quickly wanted to just let the listeners know, even though these things I'm going to be describing have also happened, I have a relationship with my parents today. So I just wanted people to also know that although there's been so many devastating things that have happened in our family, there's also been a lot of healing. So just to give hope to some listeners, in case, they're resonating with what I'm saying already themselves.
That's beautiful. That's so important.
Yeah. So, but just to continue, life would continue that way for me for a long time, just facing the world alone, not having conversations, about what happened at school today. So really not having that ability to communicate, which was really devastating for me as a child, right? So I would have to come to my own conclusions. And you could imagine, as a 6-year-old, what kind of conclusions you would come to, right? Nothing really truly informed. As a young girl, like I was saying, I would be outside often by myself, and by the time I would say 4 years old, I was playing in a shrub, so like a hedge around a house, and I was hiding under it where it was barren, just the branches were there, and a man had just come and scooped me up, carrying me like a case of beer, and just scooped me up and took me around the corner, and behind my house was a ravine, a green space. And that's where this man had raped me, viciously. So much so I became unconscious. And when I had come back to, in my silly, I thought I fell asleep in my young years, right? And then when I had finally woke up, I thought, or come back to consciousness, the pain in my body, it just felt like somebody had punched me in my stomach so badly. And I was injured and I couldn't find my clothes. I was scared. I didn't know how they had come off, and all of these things. And so that started around 4. But again, as life would progress and summers, would come and go, I would find myself outside of the house again with no support. And this is the point where the neighborhood boys would play science project with me. They would literally chase me down. They would, 4 or 5 of them, they would chase me down. They would pin me down, and they would start to remove my clothes. And they would touch me with garbage and sticks and other things. And it was so, I remember when the very first time that they had perpetrated touching me with garbage, I just remember turning, like looking up to the heavens, and I just turned my head away because I felt so much shame. And I just, at that moment in time, I just started to die inside, because I wasn't able to protect myself or get away from these boys. And now this was happening on a regular basis throughout the summers or whenever I'd be out by myself. And so I really learned, you better run. You better learn how to run and protect yourself, right? So I learned that defending myself, I was on my own. So this would be happening on a regular basis. And of course, within our family, the dynamic of violence didn't start with my mother, right? It ended with me, but it didn't start with my mother. And it started before that. And her father, my maternal grandfather, he was a multi-generational convicted child pedophile. And so by the time I was 7 years old, he would become my 8th abuser, just by the time I was 7. And so I had learned at a very young age. In fact, I don't remember a time that my body was my own. And from a very young age, I came to believe that women were only good for one thing, And that's also what my grandfather was telling me, and many other things as well, while he was abusing us and sexually molesting us. And he had, to my mother, to her sisters, any female he could get his hands on that was a child. He was an undeterred pedophile.
Horrific.
Yeah. Some of these instances that I've just described, they've been some of the most painful in my life, but they've also been some of the most fundamental jumping points for my success, right? And by success, I mean my ability to forgive, my capacity to love. They didn't take it from me. That's mine, and so I'm proud of that fact, so I just wanted to say that, there people who harm us, their ability to take from us is so grand, but inside we can say, no, you had the outside of me, but you can't have the inside of me.
Oh my gosh, that is so powerful. I'm sitting here with goosebumps when you just said that. Like, the hairs on my body are standing on end. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut off. I'm fascinated by what you're sharing. I find every time that women share their stories, there's always new things that come out. And maybe you've shared these with others, but I haven't heard them. So I'm with the listener here, hearing new details of your story. And I'm, as a mother, and feeling that that sadness, that grief for your younger self, and how terrifying and unnerving that must have been. And I can't imagine. I can't imagine going through that. And so continue. Where next? How?
Yeah. So at this point in time, life would continue to change for me. My family would then start to break apart as we got older into my teen years. And myself and my brother, as my sibling, my brother and I had moved with my dad. We had been in Scarborough, and then we had moved to a smaller southern town in Ontario, Chatham, Ontario, more of an agricultural center. Definitely far different than the Scarborough and Toronto that I had come from. And so while we were there, that's when my family had faced divorce and had really broken apart. And so I would remain with my dad and my brother, and we would continue to just move around. Like, we just moved so much. Same thing in school. By the time I graduated grade 8, I had already gone to 9 different public schools.
Wow.
Right? And I had gone to the same public school from kindergarten to grade 3. So that means I went to 8 more public schools from grade 3 to grade 8.
Oh my gosh.
So you can see how by now I'm in my teenage years, I'm not doing very well in school. My behaviors are starting to act up. So now I'm getting all of these labels that I'm a bad kid, I'm a problem child, I'm disruptive, I'm all of these things. Meanwhile, actually what people were seeing, the behaviors, was the trauma that I was experiencing, but nobody was able to notice it, or nobody cared to notice it. I don't know. But in the same token, those labels had me becoming more and more marginalized from my own peers. So now in high school, finding myself more marginalized from my own peer group, I would have some closer friends, a small group of friends, and this one girlfriend of mine, she now I'm about 17. And this one girlfriend of mine says, she calls me up and she goes, "Guess what?" I said, "What?" She goes, I'm stripping." I said, "What?" She says, "Yeah, I'm making a lot of money." I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, why don't you come with me?" I went with her because I didn't believe her. In our friendship, she was the quiet one. There's no way she would be doing that, taking her. Come on. I was the loud and the rambunctious one in the friendship. If anybody was going to be doing that, it would be me. I didn't believe her. And there I go, meeting her at the strip club at 17 years old, at a time when I had finally become hopeless in my life. And around the age of 16, after becoming pregnant, I decided and I thought that I would pass on violence to my children like it was a virus or a cold. So I had decided that adoption was the best route for my family, because I loved my son already so much that I didn't want to pass on the violence. I didn't want to hurt my child. And so after I left the hospital and posted my child for adoption, that is the day I died. I stopped fighting. There was nothing left to fight for. Yeah. And I just really became hopeless, to the point, and by hopeless I mean having zero expectation of any positive outcome in any area of your life. I literally had nothing. And I was just so broken at that time that I didn't care. So by the time I got into the strip club and I saw what my friend was doing, and she was on the stage making money, these guys were hooting and hollering at her and cheering her on. And it seemed to me at the time, it seemed good. It seemed like they were paying her attention, right? Because don't forget, I've been neglected. I had nobody paying me attention. So any attention's good attention, all of a sudden, I thought at that time. And so they're all paying her attention. She's making money. And of course, I was invited to go up to the stage that same night, not knowing that the owners of the club were obviously looking for younger girls like myself.
And that was going to be my question. We always hear the argument of people saying, well, people are over 18. Like when you have everything up and above board and out of the underground, the mythical underground that people speak of, that's, what we need to keep children and youth out of these type of areas. But obviously that wasn't the case for you. They didn't ever ask you for ID or try to, did you have a fake ID, or how did they obviously didn't care? Or
they knew my age. In fact, I'm not the only one. There were many others there as well that were underage. So they were using people like my friend to bring their friends, just like other traffickers do. They use other females to recruit other females. And no, they never asked for my ID because they knew I was young. So if they had my ID on file, they would have been in trouble versus not having my ID on file, which would have been a fine.
Wow.
Right? So they would have been able to, so they didn't ask for the ID knowing full well I was underage. So, and they asked me, how old are you? I told them 17. And I had just turned 17. Like, I mean, I had just literally turned 17. So they also, not only that, but they would let the customers know too. And so, because that would create more busyness in the clubs. Yeah. So the younger the girls, it seemed the more busier that the club would be that night.
Sick.
Yeah, it really is. So these were people perpetrating this on purpose, knowing full well. And so I had started stripping that night for the first time. And I can't tell you the feeling I had. I'll tell you now, it's not the same. But then I felt incredible. I really did. I was like, yes, I'm finally going to get paid for what they're taking from me. I'll finally get remunerated. I felt I had power. And it was a false sense of power. I'm incredibly aware of that now. And I became aware of it at the time as well. Because here I am in the strip clubs. And I'm thinking I'm empowered. Here I am 6-8 months later, thinking I'm empowered. But then I suddenly realize, they call me over. They choose me. I don't choose them. They decide how many dances I dance for them. I don't decide how many dances I dance for them. They decide, the house decides how much money is paid per dance, right? And I remember when I was in the strip clubs, a dance had gone from $40 to $15. Right, because they were flooding in other girls from other areas.
I was just about to say,
driving down the prices.
Must have been an influx of a lot of young girls.
Influx of organized crime who brings in the young girls. So what was happening with a lot of these places I found was that organized crime was a part of it. And because of that, they were bringing a variety of people, many Canadians, mostly Canadians, but also people through visas. The visa system that we have in Canada, student visa or temporary foreign permit.
Didn't they, and this might have been before your time, but there was also, and I don't want to take us too far off because I'm sorry, but wasn't there was a stripper visa program? Was that still in effect?
That's why we had all the Eastern Europeans at the time, was because of the stripper visa. And in fact, at least in Ontario, I saw it in a paper, they didn't obviously want Canadians doing this job. So that's why they had the stripper visa. And again, that's why in the 90s, I'm suggesting that we had the majority of Eastern European. Whereas if you look at the parlors today, you're seeing a massive representation of Asian and South Asian women.
Yeah.
And that's again because of organized crime and because of the visa process and the student process.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at this strip club and so you're having this moment of realization, which is pretty remarkable,
Mm-hmm.
because we know that once you're in that whole world, the dissociation, the justification, all
Mm-hmm.
these things just really stop us usually from arriving at that. And if we start to encroach on that awakening, it very quickly goes away and we excuse it.
Yes.
So what happened then?
Yes, denial was my best friend at the time. I must admit to that.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened then was, as I had realized, I actually don't have that much, I don't have power because I never got into the industry for money. It was never about the money. I honestly felt like I had power over these guys who were abusing me and finally getting paid for just what they were taking. And so when I had realized that finally, I started to back away from the strip clubs. But I had moved to another strip club than the one I was at. And I had actually moved to a club called $1 Million Saloon in Canada, in Toronto, Canada area. And it was a very large club. And that's where I had met a girl there. She was actually a shooter waitress. So she wasn't she wasn't a stripper like myself. She was just a shooter waitress. And so she went around and talked to all the guys, right? I just went around to the ones that I was dancing for. And we were really good friends. I'm now staying with her. And she met this guy and she wanted to go out with him. I was like, no, I ain't doing alcohol. I ain't interested. Right? Finally, she really wanted to go. She goes, no, it's not like that. I just want to go for dinner and meet this guy. I really like him. I said, okay, I'll go with you. But I'll tell you, I will leave you there. And I have a rule. You never leave a girl behind. But I told her straight up, I will break that rule on this one. So sure enough, I went with her. Went to a restaurant, just like she said, a couple of guys sitting there. There's a big table of other guys over there, a few people in the restaurant that we were at. And I'm sitting down with them and she's really chatting them up. I'm not interested in these two people. They're not really interesting to me. And so I get up, I go to the bathroom. And as I'm coming back, a guy is sitting at a big table there. He says to me, he starts talking with me and he offers me a seat. So I sat down and better conversation than was had at the other table. So he was talking to me and telling me what he did and that he had a magazine company. And he thought actually after talking with me, he said to me even, he goes, you're really smart. I would be happy to offer you a job. Right. And I said, no, thanks. I know better. I'm not looking to, basically be under somebody's desk. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I denied it, but he gave me his card. Well, my friend and I at the strip club got into a very big fight and we separated as friends. And now because I was staying with her, I had nowhere to go, right? Nowhere to be. And I now had no money. And so I looked at the card. I gave it a call. I said, so about that magazine company. And he goes, yeah, I remember you. Looking for a job? I said, yeah, I am. And so I started working for this magazine company called EIO, Erotica in Ontario. And what I didn't realize, unfortunately, was that where I would come into contact for my first time with very significant and serious organized criminals. And so working for this magazine company is where I would meet my trafficker. He was also working there. And I stopped working there when when I had come into the office one day and a couple of guys from Florida were running the place. And they said, what are you doing here? I took one look around. I mean, the walls. They had ripped the walls down. Okay, so all you could see was the bare bones, right? So there's no drywall. So they said, don't you read the paper? I said, what are you talking about? And they said, so and so is dead. So he was shot. He was murdered, shot in his car at a stop sign where he lived in Hamilton, Ontario. And so things were very just shut down on the spot. And so I found myself again, short of money, short of friends, no education, right? This guy calls me up, who would become my trafficker, and he says to me, he goes, well, guess what? I said, what's that? He goes, I'm trying to build a team here. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I'm running this massage parlor and, it's a great place. I'll treat you well. I'll make sure you get the prime shifts and stuff like that. You won't have to do what you don't want to do.
That's always the line, right? Every time.
Yes, it is, in fact, because the same line he's told to thousands of other girls and women, all to be taken away, all to be just a facade. And so, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And I said, okay, well, I got 3 rules. And because I am, just so the listeners know, I am white. When I was younger, I was not bad looking, and I was very slender, and I had a desirable body, a consumable body, and so that's when I realized that I had a little bit of bargaining chips at the beginning, and I said, I don't want to work the night shifts. I'll never get a license. And I'm never sleeping with the owner of the spa. Those are my 3. And I said that to them. And I said, if you want, then I'll stay if you don't mind. Of course, all of those were broken, except for the licensing one. I never did get a license.
Oh, interesting. Yes. And we're going to talk about licensing because I know that is our shared hot topic that we often come together upon in Canada. So I definitely want us to touch on that.
And we're getting there.
Oh yeah. We got lots to say about that.
Yes, we do. So here I am without being ever licensed, hoping that the police and law and enforcement would see, why has she never had a license? And yet she's still there. It was a sign to them to help me. And they just didn't see it at the time. But aside from that, I took the shifts. I started on the day shift like promised. Of course, those turned into the night shift. This guy started romancing me, treating me better than the others for a moment in time, and started really gaining my trust. And then he manufactured something. He had one of the guys from the old magazine company call me and threaten me that I owed money.
Oh.
And so what does he do? He comes on the phone. She doesn't owe you anything.
Oh, and it was all an elaborate hoax.
Absolutely orchestrated scheme. Right? And I can't believe it. I didn't know it at the time. Now I can totally see. And so it was absolutely an elaborate orchestrated example. And so the second he did that, for the first time in my life, I felt safe. See, my trafficker got me by making me feel protected. I was actually never in the life for money. I really was just trying to get power over my own body, understand myself, right?
And he knew that. He knew the vulnerability, and he knew exactly what to say and do to get in your mind and get that control over you.
Exactly. You know what he said to me one time, etched in my mind? He goes, you know what I like best about you? I said, what? He goes, that you have no parents. And I was like, it struck me then, immediately, but I just, what am I going to do? Because now, there's feelings and things like that. And nonetheless, we start becoming a couple. And so as we become a couple, here I am now, I'm working the nights. I'm working 6 to 7 days every week. I am not allowed to go home. I'm no longer allowed to go to my house. Now I have to stay with him at his house. I am only doing now the things he's doing. Now I'm only, I'm on his schedule. I'm on his time. All of a sudden, we're putting our money together, right? Because we're building a future. And of course, anytime he would spend money, and I mean thousands and thousands of dollars, it would not be a problem. If I would go into that pot to go buy a simple, like let's say a pair of jeans, it was like, where'd that $50 go? He knew where every single penny went, right? And still I thought he loved me. So desperate wasn't I to need to believe that after all he had already just been starting to do to me. Well, that didn't end there. He was very much involved in organized crime, and he was climbing that ladder. That was his true family. And he, in that pursuit, had done quite well, very, very well for himself. And it was told to him as he was climbing the ranks of organized crime that he couldn't have a whore for a girlfriend anymore. Because so in other words, he had to break up with me and take on a square girlfriend, or I had to square up.
Yeah, to have a better cover for his, the any eyes that were coming on him probably.
Well, no, what's happening is because, yes, that also, but because he'd climbed high enough, he was now in the realm of meeting the other people's families. So now they're having dinners with their wives. They can't have me sitting there when I know that they're using all these girls.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so that's why. And so of course, what he did was he actually comes up to me after this. He says that he can't have a whore for a girlfriend. He says, you're going to run the day shift. You start tomorrow. I was like, what?
And probably in your mind, you're thinking, okay, this is like improvement, right? Like, I guess like kind of climbing the ladder is maybe, I'm assuming something, but maybe you can clarify kind of what that was
So
like.
let me tell, yeah, for sure. So what I found was that I didn't understand why he'd want me to run the day shift because I was making the money, not him. Right. So, but I didn't see he was getting revenue from all the organized crime he was doing as well. So he wasn't just getting revenue from the girls. So when he had flipped me into the day shift, at first I was terrified. I was like, how am I going to make money? Where am I, what am I going to do? I don't know how to manage anything. I'm a girl. Like everybody, all my childhood beliefs came back into I'm nothing, right? And so I was terrified. And then that next morning when I started, I'll tell you, Andrea, I walked in the first customer with my own clothes on. I mean pants, nothing hoochie. I'm not wearing my working, if I could air quote, working clothes. I was wearing comfortable clothes and a tank top. And I walked in my first customer. I put him in a room and I said to him, because see the difference with me, I would never parade a girl. I would never do that. I would always ask the customer. See, I was always paraded, right? Guys would, or you'd be sitting there and guys would say, I'll take you.
The lineup and
yeah. Right. And so, you'd line the girls up, they go into the room. Hello, my name is so-and-so. Hello, my name is so-and-so. Hello, my name is so-and-so. And then I went in, and, then I would say to the customer, okay, I got, who do you want? What are you looking for today? What do you like? And it would always be the same thing, slender, busty, blonde. They're looking for, clean. Unfortunately, rich, is really funny because I didn't think that they were very clean.
Yeah.
But aside from that,
a little bit ironic there.
yeah, right. And so when I had started operating the parlor and when I took my first customer in the room and when I took his money, and I didn't have to provide a sexual service, that feeling of empowerment that I thought I had back in the strip club, I had it again.
Absolutely understandable. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I am not having to go into these rooms. I am not having to have sex with these customers, and they're giving me their money. You know what? I finally felt like I was fucking them over. I did. I was like, screw you guys. You're so, I always used to think, you're taking this money from your family. It's coming from somewhere to come here. Something is not happening in your regular life with the amount of money that these people are spending here, right? So I was just always floored by that. And finally, so after that had happened, I really felt empowered for a long time, but it was, again, a false sense of empowerment entirely. And I would soon come to learn that after, walking in customers. And I'm telling you, the massage parlor that I was operating was actually Canada's largest massage parlor. There's what's called a stable. So those that were there and licensed to work at that specific parlor were between 40 and 60 women every given day of the week. Mostly between 50 and 60.
And for Canada, that is a mega brothel.
It is.
We do see a lot of the smaller places that are typically 3 to maybe 6 rooms.
Maybe.
A 6-room studio is huge in Canada.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is like a mega brothel.
Yes. So we were a 12-room. At the beginning, we were operating from basically 9 in the morning, until 4 in the morning, 4 a.m. But then we ended up going 24 hours because we had so much demand for services that we were a 24/7 operation. That meant that I would be working again, even as somebody who is now, I hate to say, managing these places or operating them, but as I was doing some of those activities, I was working again hours and hours and hours and hours upon a day, 14, 16-hour days, getting home in enough time to just go and rest and, get right back and stuff like that. So there was no downtime. There was no going to the gym. There was no deciding that I wanted to just go grab a bite of food by myself where I could do that. I always had to check in. I always had to let my trafficker know where I was. Right? By now, I had already long ago learned that he didn't need to check in with me. I needed to check in with him. And that was my job, right? He had my focus constantly on him, so I would never have any focus on myself. And so I really wasn't doing anything in life other than being in massage parlors and watching pornography every day, all day.
And I'm imagining that they were playing on the screens in the rooms. And
actually, we didn't have porn in the rooms, but we had them in the waiting rooms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We right. We had
I've never seen that or even heard of that.
Really?
So, yeah.
We had 2 massive waiting rooms. We actually had to take over a whole other suite in the building we were in just to have a waiting room. That's how busy we were.
Yeah, because, you hear, well, they all have the waiting rooms because, like, we know the demand is just nonstop. But it's funny because usually you never see any of the signs that prostitution is actually occurring in these places, in these common areas, like the hallways. Like, you might see the silhouette of a woman, photo on the hallway wall, things like that. But for us in Edmonton, it was always in the rooms on the TVs and stuff, but never in a waiting room. So that's quite interesting.
Oh yeah,
and alarming.
Yes. As soon as you walked in, pornography was in all the waiting rooms. And not just that, we'd have vending machines, cigarette vending machines at the time. Of course, our parlor had a bank machine, so no guy would have to go down the road. Right.
Yeah, you can't let them leave once you've got them in there.
No, right. And that's what they were doing. They were kind of building this place in a way where it was this man's pad.
One-stop shop.
Where you have rights, privileges, and entitlement to women's bodies. So what the shop actually offered was not cigarettes, was not food. It was the right to entitlement, the right to act as you pleased against the women that were here. Right.
So you're at this point, you're now in what has been sold to you as this like leadership role. For anyone who's listening who has heard of any of my work, it was the same for me, where it was moving up that, so-called corporate ladder in this industry. And so that creates this victim offender overlap. And so I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of us feel a lot of shame when we talk about becoming one of the top girls, or, falling so privy to this sex work ideology that we believe that, hey, I'm just improving at my job. I'm just really good at my job. And
I'm helping people.
Yeah.
I was totally brainwashed. I'm helping them because at this parlor here, I'm telling the girls, you don't have to have sex with your clients. Yes, it is sometimes called a happy ending. There is a sexual gratification, but you don't have to have sex with them in order to do that if you don't want to. And so here I am being taught, oh, well, I'm doing something good. I think I'm doing something good because I'm not like the other parlors. Which wasn't true anyways, because my trafficker was telling them all that they had to sleep with everybody. So, right? But at this point in time now, I am now 100% under his control. I am not able to do anything. I'm reporting back all the time. Licensing officers, police are coming in. I'm getting busted. We're getting raided. I've been arrested approximately 7-8 times. I don't remember exactly, but 7 or 8 times. And I was arrested before I took on my first indoor customer. Yeah, the police at the time just didn't know the signs, although there's been so much improvement now. I think so, but at least I believe in policing, in recognizing the signs of trafficking and exploitation.
Yeah, we've come a long way, but that's a tale as old as time for women all over the world, of being the ones who bear the brunt of the criminal justice system's response. And, even when the men are found there, even when a visible pimp or trafficker is there, even when the John is there, tale as old as time. Like I said, it's, nab the woman. She's the problem. She's the fallen girl, the fallen woman.
Well, remember who was arresting me at the time? It was called the Morality Squad. Oh, remember?
That's right. Well, we had Vice.
Oh, yeah. We had the Morality
Squad. Before that, it was the Morality Unit, I think, within Edmonton Police. That was before my time, but yeah.
Yeah. So here I am getting arrested by the Morality Police. And so obviously I'm exactly what everybody thinks.
Which then further embeds that in you, right? Is that I'm the problem. And even though you're probably aware to some degree that you're not, because you've lived in that reality, it's still that external messaging that's telling you that, when you're so controlled or defeated on your self-worth, you just can't fight that being internalized.
That's right. That's right. So get it. But the problem was every time I got arrested, after the first time, I learned real quick, never say anything, because I talked to the police. They'd asked me, how long you been here? And I was like, this is my first day, and so I talked with them. And of course they get the disclosure in 2.2 seconds from their well-paid lawyers. And I got hauled in real quick. And that's when I was, I figured out then you're never talking to the cops again.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I would continue to get arrested, what that would do was it would continue to escalate or it would elevate my status in the group, because now I became more and more solid. So, every time the police came, which then now tainted me with the people that were supposed to help me. Right. So now I'm looking like I'm doing all these things. Now they're no longer helping me. I'm considered a criminal. I'm not considered a victim. And with that being said and done, I know it's changed a great bit today's date, thankfully.
It has.
Yeah. So
at least in Canada, we can say.
Yes, I can say in Canada, and I can say in my area of Ontario, they're not arresting women as like they have been in past. Yeah. They're not doing it.
Well, and for the listener, we do have I guess the term that's most preferred is Nordic model legislation, which is a partial decrim model here in Canada that we've had since 2014. And this makes exempt from prosecution the exploited individual, but does criminalize the purchasing of sex as well as the third-party profiteering, all these things. So this is our law called Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. And Casandra, who's here with me, was someone who was super instrumental in having that law become recognized. And at the time it was tabled as Bill C-36. So this has been a fight in Canada for so many years, like probably going back, I would say 2003 or 2004 was when it all kind of began. And maybe you can correct me, but that's...
No. Well, that's when it started, because it was only in 2005 when they had first made the first criminal code regulation of taking people's identity documents. Remember? So that was 2005, and that was the first thing related to trafficking. And it would only be 2014 in Canada when we would start to truly criminalize the seller.
And what I find interesting about that is we've had since 2005 human trafficking laws that were brought in by Joyce Smith.
Yes.
Which, Joyce Smith Foundation, like I mentioned in your intro, gave you a much deserved award for your work. But how come it took from 2005 to 2014 for us to recognize, this bigger picture about demand and about, commercial sexual exploitation that goes beyond just trafficking? But yeah, we're going off course.
We are, but if I could say, just to touch on that very quickly, the reason why that's even happened, I want to say, is because of the entire incredible survivor community that has been uplifting and really pushing the ball forward on that. And I just want to say the survivor community in Canada is incredible.
Yeah, it really is. It definitely is. And I think it was very inspirational for me too, because, when I was in prostitution, it was 2006 to the end of 2012, so 7 years. And I remember being in the industry and of course being brainwashed like we all were, and being like, I'm going to go down and go to Ottawa, the other side of the country. I'll get on a bus, and I was going to write something stupid on a sign like blowjobs are better than no jobs, all the stupid catchphrases and stuff. And it was really the survivor voices and starting to hear about the Bedford decision where they were striking down the old laws and kind of, the things that were happening through the courts that, served a little bit of awakening for me. Obviously, there's still that deprogramming, but yeah, I echo your sentiments. The survivor community here in Canada is fierce, and I hold everyone in such high esteem. But okay, so let's... I don't want to take all this time on your story because I know it's hard to share it. And there's so much to share. We could probably talk for 5 hours about it. But so you're in this brothel now. You're in this, I guess what you could call, or what people might consider, this power position now of managing the brothel. So how do you, I guess, have this moment of awakening, like genuine awakening, where you say enough is enough and you begin this exiting process? Like, what was that like, and how did that happen?
I would love to say that I was some courageous, brave woman, and that's incredibly not true. I did not find courage until I had left the industry, when my trafficker no longer was over me. My trafficker and I, we, in the course of him trafficking me and all of this stuff, I was not romantically interested in him at all. And And so, he took up with another girl essentially. And when he had taken up with another girl, I took the opportunity to take the side door out. And so, but I wasn't able, after we had broken up, I wasn't able to leave for about 8 to 9 months after. I had to continue to run the spas. And he was pressuring me to just, head, to work for him for another couple of years. Once I said no and stuff like that, like I just, we had it worked out well for me. But then what was happening was all the other organized criminals were coming in, all the bikers and et cetera, were coming in and saying, you can have any spa you want. You can run any spa you want, so just where do you want to go? And I kept telling them, sorry, no, I'm going to retire, stuff like that. Yeah, don't worry about me and this guy, his friends were coming in, his organized criminal friends were coming in. Hey, how's it going? We heard, because they were just checking to see if I was going to talk.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was in a very dangerous situation.
Understandably. And the sharks were circling.
That's
right?
what they were. They were sharks.
That you were, for lack of better terms, a free agent now, basically. And
100. And
yeah.
I knew I was in great danger. And so what I actually had to do was train his new girlfriend how to run the business. Mm-hmm. So that's unfortunately my way out. And that's what I did. And so when I had gotten out of the life myself, it was September 11th, 2004. It was almost exactly a decade to the day.
911.
Yep.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so September 11th, 2004 is when I had gotten out of the life. And the thing that did save me was I had a place to stay. I had a safe house where I could go to, a basement apartment, and a family that would take me back in. And about 3 days after, I just slept for 3 days. I don't have any recollection after I got out of there, but I think it was about 3 days later. I've always wondered about God in my life, and I decided that I would check him out for the last time, because I had tried him a couple other times, and I thought he kind of gave me the big bird, and didn't really love me. And this time though, and so actually I would say my faith has strengthened me to find the courage I need to learn more of the truth about myself and about the situation I was in. And so I would say that it was my faith that encouraged me to be here today.
Wow. This is so powerful. And, I always, whenever I have conversations with people who share something that is just so deep and so transformative, but also so grim in so many ways and hard to listen to, like you always kind of wonder, like, how do you say, like, wow, okay, thanks for sharing that? Like there's just never enough words that affirm like the courage and the strength that so many survivor women have and carry within themselves. And so of course I'm at that place right now being like, how do you say, like, good job? Because it's an understatement, whenever you think of overcoming all of those things, right? We all have this different story going in there, but I hear stories that just rock me. And even after 7 years of being in the sex industry, you don't really think many things will rock you.
Yeah.
But every time that I talk to, women like you, and that's why you're such a huge inspiration for me, because I hear, like I said, new things from you every time. And I think, I don't know if I could have survived that, because even still, like, I never had a pimp or trafficker. And for me, it was just poverty and just that sheer economic destitution that led me to the industry. So I did have, of course, low self-esteem. I don't think any women in the industry have good self-esteem, but, I just want to honor you and just say, that's why I look up to you so much. And I really have always thought, just so highly of you, and really see you as a shining light for so many people in Canada, especially those who have been trafficked and, just haven't maybe processed that yet. Like, you give a lot of light. That's the word, that just shining light. So, thank you for your vulnerability to share this and,
thank you.
And just, do that. And so, I do want to mention, for the listener, we're going to link a very, very powerful TEDx talk that Casandra did in 2019 in the show notes of this episode. And it's quite impressive. This episode is called "I Was Sex Trafficked for Years. Brothels Are Hidden in Plain Sight." And this video, in just less than the first year that it was out, it received over 2 million views. And since it has now been on TED's website, so not even now, I think a full 5 years, it has had over 3.7 million views. Like, I'm sitting here with a friggin' celebrity right now. But it's amazing because honestly, there's been, and maybe you know of this, there's been some survivors who have gone on TED and have done talks about equality model legislation, that partial decrim model, and their videos have been pulled from that website.
Okay.
Yeah. I know of one for sure, and I've heard of other people that kind of got the door shut. And that might be getting to be a different thing now because Alexandra Stevenson, who we both know, she just recorded for TEDx as well. So I haven't yet seen her video. It should be coming out pretty soon.
Okay.
But this video that you have done is amazing. Like, this has undoubtedly rocked so many people's minds and changed so many people's hearts. And it's funny, I think the video is 11 minutes long?
17.
Oh, is it 17? Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember, but when I was kind of preparing for us to have this conversation, I said, I'm going to pull a couple quotes because as I was listening to it for like the 50th time I've listened to it, I just kept hearing these quotes and I'm like, oh, I got to make sure to mention that. Oh, I got to put that down. So I do have a couple things. And again, listener, it's in the show notes, but I want to move us into licensing because that is really, one of your many, many areas of strength.
Yes.
And some of the things that you say in there are just mind blowing. So one of them is you talk about getting a fine for being late and talking back and not having what you call a perfectly primed body. And so we do have, unfortunately, in Canada, many municipalities that are licensing what they call body rub centers. And this has been happening across Canada in many jurisdictions since probably about the early to mid 1990s for the actual licensing regime. Oh, it was 80s. Okay. In Edmonton, it was about mid 90s.
Was it?
Yeah, I'm always going off of Edmonton. But I want to talk about that, what you call the facade. And so you say body rub centers, and this is quote, they provide a facade of acceptability, safety, and option on a woman's part. And then you say, but what we are actually doing is enshrining a man's right to buy a living, breathing human being. So there is this normative effect. And I already mentioned, the fines and stuff, but I guess let's just start maybe touching on that two-system tier that we're starting to see in Canada where, okay, everyone knows sex trafficking happens. Everyone thinks it's bad. That's an agreed upon thing. We need to abolish trafficking. But what we're seeing simultaneously is almost this endorsement of municipal licensing as a form of harm reduction and this way to prevent trafficking. So I guess I want to ask kind of, I already know that we sit on the same position about this, but what is your opinion, I guess, for the listener about, these licensing regimes? Because people are really doing this compartmentalization, and it's really annoying when they can't see that the crossover happens and that there are trafficked individuals who are are being trafficked out of these locations and these so-called businesses. So kind of just, want to pick your brain for the listener on licensing.
Yeah. So in Toronto, at least in the 80s is when licensing had started. And the deal behind licensing was it's considered a nuisance law, right? So women were considered a nuisance. And it was not looking good for tourism and people coming into Toronto, Canada, as outdoor prostitution was so visible, right? And so they said, well, we can't ever get rid of this, so we're going to create body rub parlors, a license stream called body rub parlors. Now, the body rub parlor actually stipulates that it gives you the right and privilege to rub, stimulate, and massage any muscle in the human body. So because the penis is considered a muscle, exactly, that's how it's done. So that's how these parlors are getting away with it. So I'm not saying that licensing, I am saying that licensing intentionally did it. Yes, I am actually. Let's just stop there.
Let's just go there.
Yeah, okay. They did. So, but what I don't think was that they would understand that they were a part of really the commercialization of women to the degree that they do. Licensing creates a storefront where women and girls are picked for their hair color, for their breast size, for their weight. And so I think that they didn't realize that they would make it a real engine, right? Because licensing is the engine that organized crime needs, and we're the fuel for the tank, right?
Yeah.
So the three of these have to work together.
What is your overview of this this argument of harm reduction through licensing?
So if after running a parlor for a great many years, if I honestly thought that I could reduce the harm of women, I would be back in the business, Andrea, right? It's not possible. These are places that actually enshrine violence. Licensing allows you to purchase another human being, right? And I mean, purchase parts of them that aren't for sale, right? It creates a storefront for women and girls. And it acts as a facilitator for organized crime to operate freely and willingly here in Canada. The licensing system, if you ask me, doesn't do anything to safeguard or protect the women inside, because licensing and bylaws can't even get inside, right? And the police don't come in that often to parlors in my area. Right? So we're not seeing police raids right now. And what I'm also seeing, which is really frustrating, is that before we just used to have body rub parlor licenses. Well, because the demand is so high and because organized crime, the pressure is the downforce, what happened was it created a bunch of new labels. So it's basically now we have holistic centers and wellness centers. Well, this is just lipstick on a pig. Okay, it is the same thing. They're just trying to broaden the categories under the licensing regime so that they could operate more and more of these places.
Yeah, and it's very similar in Edmonton too. And I think Edmonton is kind of piggybacked off of Toronto, now knowing that we were behind you guys, right? And yeah, I remember when I first started in licensing, which, I never wasn't licensed, it was a holistic reflexology massage. And then it went into just massage. And then it went into body rub center, body rub practitioner, as they would call it. But it was the exact same thing, right? Very carefully worded, erotic massage, soft tissue manipulation of an erotic nature. I said, like, what the heck, And at the time, like, in one way, it was kind of weird because it almost served to sanitize to myself.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a license that said, you are a prostitute, So it didn't have that harsh sting to it. I was a holistic reflexologist, which was great to put on my taxes for that discretion, so-called. But I think it does have this sanitizing effect, right? This normative effect that, like you said, has just exploded what we're seeing of this commercialization of women and our bodies in Canada, that once you kind of open that, it's very hard to bring that back in and kind of rein that in, because now anyone who is against the system is seen as a prude, is seen as someone who's against women having safety because they don't understand that harm is inherent.
That's correct.
And that you can't mitigate these things away by, just giving someone a piece of paper or putting a panic button that you probably can't push in front of this man who is alone with you in a room and is twice your size and, aggressive.
Let's say you can even get to the panic button.
Exactly.
By the way, in our parlor, there was not one single panic button anywhere. Yeah. You were on your own when you were in that room. Yeah. And if you came out because you had a bad customer manager, you know what they did? Not me, but you know what the other managers would do? Back in you go finish that customer.
Oh my God.
There was no not serving a customer. If you got picked, you're going in. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. We never had panic buttons until the later years that I was in the industry. I want to say it came in around, 2010 probably. But yeah, it was the same thing. It was kind of like, customer is always right. And when it creates this like work mentality or business mentality, the customer is always right.
Exactly.
And so it's just, very, very
well,
sick.
And the managers are mostly all men. So of course the customer's right. Because he's not, you're right. So
yeah, and if the manager isn't a man, there's a woman as a figurehead, just like you were, right. That is the face of the business, that is there to take the brunt of the fall.
That's right.
So just a lot of men are using this system to have this guise of consent, and
that's right.
And so there was this one part where you say in your TED talk, I had started to deceive myself.
Mm-hmm.
This is my choice. I'm making this money. And so I think that that really speaks to this whole choice feminism of, if women are choosing to do this and claim they are, we never look at anything that has led them there. But if they claim this, all of a sudden it's, women's empowerment, women's liberation. But then you talk about how, the system really was another layer of exploitation and oppression against you by the same thing that I experienced, these fines that would be levied against us by, unsavory owners, talking back or, missing, if you're 5 minutes late and you're missing your shift or you miss a sex bar, you're paying fine because it's a business in their eyes, right? It takes away the humanity of the woman and turns her into that product that is being sold to this man.
I remember they never really pulled my fines often, but I remember one time they fined me. And so they pulled my commission. So at the time the house took 40, the girl would get $10. And I had to go in a room for no money and serve a customer who took a basic massage and wouldn't keep his hands off of me and fought me the whole time. And I remember leaving that room just deflated. I was not even a human being.
And then so people will say, okay, but when we have licensing, now these women have some form of judicial recourse. But I'm sure it was the same for you where we didn't take ID of these men, and even if you fell into the licensing system, you had to be, as the woman, the one to provide all your personal information.
Yes.
Like they used to just take us over the coals and make us give absolutely everything. It was so invasive. It felt more invasive than like getting even like a passport application done. Like it was thorough. And in my mind at the time, I thought, okay, they're really looking out for me. Like they're trying to get all the info that they can about me because they're harm reduction, right? This whole thing. But I look back at it now and I'm like, it's so reactive. Like, what would that have done? Okay, so if this man comes in and he strangles me to death in the room, who was that man? We don't even know because he doesn't have to get a license. There's no John card for him that, he has to produce his ID to the city to get that license as we did. So it's a very one-sided and almost paternal and like I said, reactive system. But
it is. And back in Toronto, on top of all of what you just said, in order to be licensed, one of the qualifiers was you'd have to go get a medical.
Oh, wow.
To test for STIs. So here you are having to provide a medical that you're STI free. And, that's a part of your licensing qualification. So it is so dehumanizing, like you said.
Absolutely. And so another line, because like I said, I have so many I could quote. This is something that you say, this is what sex trafficking looks like in Canada. It is the brothel hidden in plain sight. And I think that was probably the most powerful line that I could pull from this interview or this TED talk that you did. And I have used that so many times. And I always try to say, it's not my words, it's Casandra Diamond's words, because hidden in plain sight, like that is so oxymoronic, right? Like hidden in plain sight, it's there, everyone knows about it, but they don't because of that guise of acceptability and
that's right,
and everything. So
that licensing provides. And so yeah, exactly that like you had said earlier in our speaking today, about this happens underground. Actually, no, I never dug a hole and I was never prostituted in that hole that was dug. No, it is in plain sight. And just to back it up today, bringing more to date technology, a lot of people are like, well, prostitution isn't happening so much. I said, what are you talking about? Well, I don't see anybody standing on the street. These kids and these women are now sitting in cars, sitting in classes, sitting in school, sitting, in their homes, and they're just waiting for a text. Once they get that text, now they go out, meet the car. They still doing car calls, still doing alley calls. They're just waiting for the phone to pop, the message to pop, where then they go out. So we're seeing just less people kind of standing around, but it's the same thing that's happening. These massage parlors now that are so-called licensed ever since COVID, you want to know their MO changed? Because they were licensed, so they were then shut down like every other business. So what did these folks do? All of them? They didn't shut down. Their phone numbers ring. So now all we're doing was sending the girls to the hotel. So now the business actually operates differently, where there's bricks and mortar, but there's still always an outcall component to all of these services now since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And these outdoor calls is where you're seeing these 14 and 15-year-old kids because they're not in the bricks and mortar and they're constantly being moved around.
Yeah. And then that's where someone will then use that to try to justify the brick and mortar and the licensing system, saying, well, that'll bring it up out of the underground. But it's this perpetuating
and it's adding,
cycle.
it's another layer of oppression. It's another layer that an individual could never get out of. That's the problem with licensing. One individual cannot protect themselves from the regime. Right? So there was no way I as an individual could act against the licensing system, right? To protect or defend myself.
Yeah. And there's a very, very strong reluctance on all municipal governments, except for, I would say, Winnipeg and Newmarket, Ontario, which is a small little pocket there. And I know that you were very instrumental in that, and we're grateful. But, you and I, we sat in, I can't remember how many years ago now it was, probably 2000. Oh, geez, I don't even know. 2018?
About, perhaps 16.
Okay.
Perhaps 16.
Yeah. So we sat in, Casandra graciously invited myself and Kate Quinn, the former executive director of the Center to End All Sexual Exploitation, now retired, my mentor and role model in many ways. And she said, come, and let's just sit and talk to the City of Toronto administration body here. And it was horrifying. And it was very much just like what we see in Edmonton, with a lot of men, a lot of older men in these suits, maybe some of them being sex purchasers themselves.
Absolutely.
Trying to tell women like us who have been doing this work for, 10, 20, 30 years that essentially they know better than we do about how these systems operate, what that's like for the women. And the impact that it's having on community, especially women and girls in larger society. And, I remember just, you really covered so much stuff with them. And I was just like, oh, good. Yes. Okay. I don't have to say that. Now, when it comes around to me, great. She's already covered that. But at the end, they just continued on with, the licensing system. And
actually at that time in the city of Toronto, what they were trying to do, so the body rub licensing system or category of licenses, there's more than one adult entertainment. So adult entertainment licensing then has body rub parlor, but it also has holistic centers. So what we were able to do in the city of Toronto, of course, with your help, and since you mentioned Kate Quinn, yes, of course, one of my dearest and favorites as well. And what had happened was they were trying to, there were only a certain amount of licenses that you could apply for in body rub under the body rub category. And they wanted to take the cap off of that.
That's right.
Right. So you could, there were only about 30 body rub licenses allowed in the city of Toronto. And they wanted to take the cap off of that.
Yeah. It was a moratorium debate, essentially.
Yeah. So, and that's definitely a nuanced conversation, but nonetheless, at the end of the day, we stopped them from doing that. And that was incredible, because if Toronto would have opened up the licensing category, we would have become America's brothel. That's what we'll become.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, I know we were at the table saying, end the licensing regime. Like, this is creating this social issue far beyond the exploitation that is happening directly to women. This is another layer of that. But that was amazing to at least know that they were willing and able to, hear us out on that regard and not have this massive explosion. Because like you said, like, we share 9,000 kilometers approximately with the US, and they have double their adult male population of our entire Canadian population, children, elderly, everything. So we've already seen that with Dennis Hoff, the owner, now deceased owner of all those Nevada brothels, saying, oh yeah, when they go full decrim in Canada, I'm setting up 4 shops,
100
places.
He wanted to make the Toronto Island a big brothel and casino.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
I think I just wanted to finally quickly just say that, in Newmarket, and I could just say this for sure. You're right. I worked very hard with the town of Newmarket. And what they did is they decided to not license the sale of sex at all. So when I hear municipalities telling me, oh, we have to license it, I'm telling you today and now, no, you don't.
Exactly. Yeah. We've got a couple cities here in Canada that are leading the way and that are starting to see the faults in this ideology and this operating system. And there is hope, but we just need more of it. So, of course, I wanted to touch on PASEPA with you, which again is our Nordic model legislation. But I know in our show here, we're going to have a lot of conversations about that because that's really what we all want wherever we are in the world as hosts for this. We're pushing for that. But I do want to really quickly just take 2 minutes and wrap up with you and just ask you, like, what next? Like, how can we move forward? I know that you and I will continue pushing for licensing to be examined and ultimately abolished because it's feeding into these things. But what do you see any other gaps or any other trends? And maybe for the listener, like, what can they do on a lower level to, just inspire some kind of change? Or if they're seeing these things happening in their municipal areas, in their towns, like, how can they stop this proliferation of this ideology of harm reduction that really we have seen is not working here for us in Canada?
There is only one true way to reduce the harm, and that is to not buy sex. So that is the only workable harm reduction solution for this issue, is that nobody, meaning nobody, buys another human being for the purposes of sex. So that is our only way out. There are many gaps in services that we still see here in Canada. Some of those gaps are, quite frankly, some in the service realm. We're having a hard time housing people that are trying to exit. Right. So housing folks is a big need that we have. But there's also huge gaps in service, like parents of these children and adults, like Miss Kathy King, the beautiful Kathy King. Like, we don't have support yet developed for parents whose children have died by exploitation or trafficking, or have been murdered, or have been returned to them, but is now a totally different child, the one that they'll never get back, the one that left. Right. So I think that we really do need to focus on the demand. And that's why I was so proud to be here at the Demand Conference. And I think we do need to focus on that. But we also really need governments and officials, those in power, to really, truly better understand the issue and not necessarily buy into a convenient answer, because this is a tough topic, and I have seen some politicians who really just don't want to deal with it. It seems too large and looming for them, so they don't want to deal with it. But that means that we are without resources or help. I want to see more exit strategies and more dollars go towards exit services, and I would absolutely like to see more educational opportunities for those that are exiting, and more ability for individuals to really kind of get their coercive debt back down. Things along those lines, I think, are some of the important things. But also, I think what is important is that we educate boys and men. Boys and men, after coming from 10 years in the industry, I absolutely do not hate men. I don't. I think that men and boys are incredible. And I think that, that there's a reality that they're facing. They're getting pushed and pulled with so many images and, so much access to them about, sexualized women and sexualized bodies in this hypersexualized culture. And I think I would just want more men to have better education, to have more insights. And as you've said, just, developing that higher emotional intelligence.
Wow. I have nothing to add to that. I was going to be, oh yeah, and then this too, and that too. But you just covered literally everything that we need. That is truly the holistic approach, like the all-encompassing, here is the actual solution. And it goes back to what you said, where it just feels overwhelming. And that's why people are choosing this convenient option of patting themselves on the back and saying, I've done harm reduction, I've kept these women safe.
That's right.
But they're not taking the time to really read the theory, speak to the survivors, come out and actually attend things like this, Ending Demand conference that we're at here, that, we take time out of our lives to come and contribute to this and to learn further and to really understand, like, just how complex of an issue this is on a social level, on an economic level, on a, internal, like, human level. And just, there's so many layers to it that, even I'm sure just like me, you always feel like you're learning something new that is taking you to a new place of understanding and just how much work we have to do and how big of a problem this is. And so, on that note, I want to, of course, finish with another quote of your TED Talk. And you say, getting out is one thing, but staying out, that's just as hard. So I think it just reinforces what you said about there needs to be these supports, because we know that a lot of people have this breaking moment where they say, I've had enough. Like my spirit cannot take anymore. I'm out.
That's right.
But we do see that revolving door where people just don't have places to go and they don't have options. And people will use that to justify the system. They'll say, well, we're going to have this problem until you fix that. But at the same time, it is a two-prong approach. We need to, yes, have that socioeconomic component that is there, that society that has those systems in place to better support people when they can exit. But we also need to be on the other end of this prevention work, like you said, with men and boys, and with changing this culture that women exist to serve men sexually. So, on that note, I know that we both have flights to catch. Yes. We hope we will catch them, because there is a blizzard here where we are in Winnipeg. But, I just can't thank you enough. I adore you from the absolute bottom of my heart. And, listeners, again, I really encourage you to check out Casandra's TED Talk, and you will just have the goosebumps throughout your body that I get every time I hear that talk all these years later. So thank you so much, Casandra. I appreciate you. And I really look forward to, following your work and just collaborating with you in the future in any way that I can, as we've done so many times before.
Absolutely. And I'm your fan too. So Andrea, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We hope you found this episode informative. To follow us on social media, click the links in the show notes below. If there is a topic you would like us to cover, you can contact us at redlightexposé.podcast@gmail.com or head on over to our website, redlightexposé.com. There you can also find a donation page if you'd like to support the show. All the hosts at Red Light Exposé are volunteers, so we rely on your donations to continue to compensate our survivor guests and cover operative costs. Thank you for listening. We hope you tune in next time.